Good afternoon and welcome to TalkSports. It is our Saturday sports special. A warm welcome to you wherever you are. Um, Welcome once again. We're getting deeper into the summer, right? And therefore, it's sooner or later we'll be taking a break, for we call it our summer recess. We try to at least get some rest, and regroup and then come again. And it is around the summertime we try to take that rest. Um, and then we get another break for what we call our winter recess, which is around Christmas. Yeah. And then we normally have a short break for the Easter, right? Yeah. So as indicated on this week's program, we'll be speaking to Lance Whittaker. He is a veteran sports journalist, Jamaica and Caribbean, indeed. And Lance will be joining us shortly. And my co-host, Rudian Sylvan, will also be joining me, hopefully. And we'll be talking about his career and lots of things regarding his distinguished career, I should say, by the way. And what sort of advice he will have for, young journalists. What is his views on the state of the sports media in particular in the region, and especially with new technology and all of that, social media, in fact, and all these other things. And we'll be discussing all these things. Just before we link up with Lance, let me let you know that the Commonwealth Games, guys, the Commonwealth Games on, right? And then we also have the CAC, Central American and Caribbean Games, that will be taking place. Well, the Commonwealth Games basically is kicking, netball, basketball, the 3-on-3 basketball, gymnastics, the track and field, they have not started as yet. Boxing started already, weightlifting, lawn, all these things that are on, they are kicking, So anyway, for the next few days, we'll see that you will have lots to watch and follow, as well as cricket, right? West Indies and Pakistan, I think rain held up play for a while. And we'll also have that as well. And what else happening? Tour de France is on. Yeah, can't forget that. It's definitely on. And then we'll be coming into some more track and field. In fact, this weekend at Icon Stadium in New York, there is the U.S. Championships. Well, it's now playing with the Para. So there is track and field at Icon Stadium, the track and field. So as indicated, folks, let me say right away, good afternoon to Edwin Sam in New Jersey. Thank you very much for joining us, Edwin, as usual. And Gordon, good afternoon. It's a sporting family. Beautiful Saturday to each and one. I think he's in Maryland. They call it the DMV area, right? He is somewhere around there. I'm hoping. Last weekend was a terrible weather, so I know he was probably indoors. Yes, folks, as indicated, I think Lance is somewhere around, and I say good afternoon and welcome to another edition of our Talk Sports. And I'm seeing my co-host Rudian Sylvan in Toronto is joining me as well. And today's program, folks, is particularly special for me, as we welcome veteran Jamaican sports broadcaster Lance Whittaker. He may not want me to say veteran, but someone who has been my mentor for the best part of my career in the sports media. And during my years as a stringer and correspondent with the Caribbean News Agency, CANA, and later became the Caribbean Media Corporation, CMC, Lance was always willing to offer guidance, encouragement, and professional advice. And like many young Caribbean sports journalists, I benefited from his knowledge, his experience, and commitment to maintaining what I will say and others said when I sent out the blast. They were reacting to it, his high standards in the profession. And today we will, more or less, we will reflect on Lance's distinguished career and some of the major events and personalities he has covered. We'll also try to discuss the changes, in the sports media landscape, whether it's radio, television, digital coverage, and some of the challenges and opportunities now facing the regional sports media. Well, lots to discuss in the next hour, and it is both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my longtime mentor and one of the respected voices of Caribbean sports broadcasting, Lance Whittaker. Welcome to TalkSports, Lance.
Hi, Michael. A pleasure to be on your show. I am aware that this show has been going on for several years now, and you've unearthed a lot of, big interviews and, triggered a lot of stories coming out of your show. So I'm happy to be on, and great to see you again, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Rudian, good afternoon to you, Rudian.
Good afternoon to you, and Lance, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah,
yes.
And
thank you very much, Rudian.
Yeah. And you should say it's a pleasure meeting Lance, Rudian, because I know you're aboard a lot.
I heard the voice. I always hear the voice, so certainly it's a pleasure. Yeah.
Right. Lance, thank you for joining. And right off, Lance, take us back to the beginning. How did your journey into sports broadcasting start? I mean, I knew you back then. I think it was RJR at the time, when I was at Carrymark and things like that. So, but give us an idea of how that journey started.
Well, my broadcasting career started in June 1984, Radio Jamaica, and it came about persistent auditions and applications and so on to get into the media, because while I was at school, I don't think I had envisioned being a broadcaster as a career. Initially, early in my high school years, I'd wanted to be a doctor, but then I realized I didn't like the sciences very much, apart from biology, but I didn't like chemistry. I didn't like physics. Then I wanted to become a lawyer, and then I accepted that I wasn't the studious type. I wasn't the person to be sitting down, doing academic reading and so on for long periods, which would have been a requirement to do legal studies. And I just pretty much went through high school doing, the best I could. A lot of emphasis on sport. I represented my school in football and cricket. And during that time, I got really, really engaged in a lot of sports analysis and sports following. Like horse racing became, I would say, my favorite sport while I was in school. And I developed a very, very strong love for boxing. And I was very, very intrigued by radio and listening to broadcasters. I listened to BBC World Service almost every day. And there was a particular horse racing commentator in Jamaica by the name of Chris Armand, who was very inspirational to me. And I would record all of his commentaries on a Saturday afternoon. And then by 7 o'clock in the evening, much to the disgust of my mom, I would be there regurgitating every word that came out of Chris Armand's mouth for that afternoon. And I tried to sound like him. So I did just okay in my O levels. I didn't excel in school academically. I just did okay. And then after I left school, it started to hit you that you have to start to chart a career, chart a course that will lead you into a professional life. And it was then that it became pretty evident to me that I was so engaged and attracted to the media that I wanted to get into the media. And I sent applications to the local newspapers, the two radio stations who were active at the time, Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation and Radio Jamaica. And I got a couple of auditions, and eventually I got through to work at RJR, Radio Jamaica, in June 1984. And that is actually how I started, because I got the job at RJR pretty much untrained, because I'd never studied broadcasting. I'd never studied journalism. And it was just on the the talent that they heard in the auditions, because the audition included reading a sporting script as if I was presenting the sports news, and I had to do 2 mock commentaries on cricket and horse racing. And that is how I got the job at Radio Jamaica, actually. And then 2 years after being at Radio Jamaica, I got a British Council scholarship to study at the BBC. So I went to the British Broadcasting Corporation in London in 1986 for 4 months to study radio production. And that's really how I started. And I just developed my career working really hard for the first couple of years until I, began to see the rewards of the hard work. And the BBC course taught me a lot. And I was pretty much an on-the-job learner, because by the time I had gotten the BBC course, I was like 2 years into the job at Radio Jamaica. So I had become reasonably confident that I could deliver radio broadcasting. My television career didn't start until many years after that at the Caribbean Media Corporation in Barbados, which is how I met you, Mike. And that's pretty much how my career started in a nutshell.
Yeah, and you mentioned the trainer. I think it was the horse racing commentator.
Yes.
Yeah, the late Chris Armand. Yeah, and I was reading something where even at school, I think it was Walmart,
Yes.
when you attended, you used to pull a little crowd, doing your little gig,
Well, well, as I said, while at school, I used to impersonate some of these commentators, because Chris Armand was the primary person that I would impersonate, but there was Tony Cozier and Reds Pereira as well. Colossal cricket commentators for the Caribbean who I would imitate. I would do a Tony Cozier, and then I would do a Reds Pereira. They were quite different, brilliant in their own ways, but their styles were significantly different. And I aced the Reds Pereira one for sure. And there were times I was at school in class and I would be there imitating a radio broadcaster, not necessarily a sports broadcaster. Sometimes this was just a broadcaster on radio, and people in front of me would be looking around for the radio because I was sounding exactly like the person they knew on radio. So when I talk to a lot of my school friends now, they told me they knew what I was going to do in my professional life. But at the time, to be honest, as I said, I never ever saw it as a profession. It was just something that I liked, but I didn't think at the time as a teenager, well, in my early teens, by the time I got to 18, 19, I thought it started to pursue broadcasting as a career. But, 14, 15, 16, going up, when I was impersonating these commentators at school, I never thought for one moment that this would be my career.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know over the span, Lance, you would have met, interacted. Some of them you have not even met personally, but you would have communicated with them. One such person is he's saying, "Good afternoon." That's Ali, coach from Grenada. That's Ali DeBellot, right?
Yes.
He said, "I did my first interview as national coach with him," and I'm sure you know the name Ali DeBellot.
Yes, I remember him well. Yes.
Right. So that's it's.
Good afternoon, Ali. Good that you're tuning in. I know you're a huge fan of Michael Bascom, so it doesn't surprise me that you're tuning into his show.
Yeah. And what would you say were the early challenges you faced while trying to establish yourself in the profession?
Challenges. I can't say that I felt challenged. It was a dream come true for me, and I didn't feel challenged at all. The very first time I went on air live on Radio Jamaica, and I came back up from the studio, a couple of the people in the newsroom had asked me where I had been before I came to Radio Jamaica, because they thought that I had, some previous experience broadcasting. So I can't honestly tell you, Michael and Rudion, that I had challenges in the early part of my career. It was a dream come true, and I felt every moment of my early years in broadcasting as a blessing for me. And I didn't really feel that challenged. I had a boss, Ed Barnes, who was he was sports editor at Radio Jamaica at the time, and Courtney Sargent, who was one of the news gatherers, and they were very helpful. they made me feel at home. And all of the assignments I got, I just lapped it up. The first time I did a football commentary, it didn't feel challenging to me. It just felt as if, I was getting to do something that I wanted to do. So it didn't feel that much of a challenge. I remember before I got into the media, there was the 1982 World Cup, and I would imitate the commentators that I was here on the World Cup. And I remember when Maradona was given a red card, and I would have my friends start a tape recorder, and I remember the words well at the time, and we would do something like to get the crowd effect. And while my friend was doing the crowd effect, I would say, Maradona, red card Maradona, and the man who came to Spain as the greatest player in the world now leaves in disgrace. So I had that on tape, and this was long before I got into the media. I said I got in at 84, and this was 1982, and these were things that I would play around doing. So I said that to say that when I got my first opportunity to do a football commentary live at the National Stadium, it was a high school Manning Cup football match between Jamaica College and St. Andrew Technical. It didn't feel like a challenge to me. It just felt like this is what I want to do. So I at the risk of sounding arrogant, I didn't feel that there were that many challenges for me. I felt I was getting an opportunity to do what I wanted to do, and I just embraced it.
Rudy, and I can bring you in because you know I will have a lot of questions.
Oh, definitely. I know.
So you go on.
No, certainly. You've been, an inspiration for many years. People look forward in listening to you and hearing from you. But it's not a broadcaster. Everybody has an interviewer they want to do. Somebody they want to do. Who is that person to you that you wanted to interview and you finally get to interview them? And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, my biggest sporting hero while I was in school was a Jamaican jockey by the name of Emilio Rodriguez. And I always dreamt of meeting him and interviewing him. And when I finally got the opportunity to interview him, I was asked to do a documentary. Well, it was a written piece, so it would be sort of a feature-like documentary on his career. And I went to his home in the evening. It was like 7:30 in the evening. He had told me when he was available. And you remember, Mikey, in those days, you had those very small size tape recorders with a very miniature cassette in it. So I put it on the table on his patio just outside in front of his lawn. And I sat down and chatted with him for about an hour to get the information to put into the feature that I was writing. And mark you, at that time, I wasn't doing print journalism at all. All I had been doing up to that point was radio journalism. But I was asked by the Track and Pool's publisher, who presented the weekly horse racing program. There was a back page feature where he would feature something, and he asked me to do it. And I'd never done print before, but I said, you know what? I think I can do this. So I sat down and interviewed Emilio Rodriguez. And when I finished the interview, I saw this look of bewilderment in his face. And I said, we call him Bimbo, Emilio Bimbo Rodriguez. That's his nickname. And Bimbo said to me, Lance, you know that half of the things that you just asked me about, I don't remember them. So it seems as if you remember more about my career than I do, because I would tell him about a Wednesday afternoon, because at that time there was racing in Jamaica Wednesdays and Saturdays and public holidays. And I told him about an afternoon when he won 5 races. And I told him all the 5 winners. And it closed with a horse trained by Eileen Cliggott by the name of Walla in the 10th and final race. And he was there in shock because he could barely remember a lot of the things that I was asking him about. But I was such a huge fan that I just knew everything about him. And I know from a Caribbean perspective that that may not be the kind of story you were looking for, because you probably were thinking of IVA Richards or
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali, or but that was the first one that resonated with me because he was my childhood star. And but from a more global perspective, I can say that, like, the first time I interviewed Donald Quarry, who was Jamaica's first sprint Olympic champion. He won the 200 meters in Montreal in 1976, and interviewing people like Evander Holyfield, because I interviewed Evander Holyfield. He had visited Barbados while I was living there, and Vivian Richards, Richie Richardson, Michael Holding. I remember having Tony Cozier live on a talk show in the studio in Jamaica. This was within 2 years of my starting in the media, and that was like a big. I actually was so nervous when I was interviewing Tony Cozier, because he, to me, is the greatest cricket broadcast journalist I've ever known. I may not be able to speak as authoritatively on cricket journalists and broadcasters from England and Australia and so on, but I've heard all of them, and I quite frankly don't think any is better than Tony Cozier. So I remember the night I had him in the studio, I felt very nervous because I couldn't believe I was sitting beside Tony Cozier and interviewing him. I was like 22 years old at the time, so um, it was, those were some of the moments that I remember best about interviewing people who, without being a broadcaster or being in the media, I would probably never had an opportunity to meet.
Certainly.
Just before, Roger Duncan. Roger, good afternoon. He says, good afternoon, Lance. I have always taken a view that if Lance is not involved, then it's probably not a big deal. Thanks for your immeasurable value to sports journalism and commentary in the Caribbean region.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Marissa. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. So just following up on Rudian's question, and this is what you answered, Lance. So how do you prepare for, a major live broadcast when the circumstances can change, without warning? And, these are some of the consequences you will have at times, especially doing live broadcasts. Whether it's radio, television, you have done numerous live broadcasts. How do you prepare for that, especially when things don't happen as you want it to happen?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that you prepare by doing hours and hours and hours of research to prepare yourself with the tools. In other words, the information, statistics, it's historical data on what you're going to present. And you've got to arm yourself with all of that information. How it is executed now is another thing. That is a skill that you develop over time, because you're not just going to go on air and regurgitate all of the information that you've gathered for the broadcast. It has to be put in context. So you have to position the various information tools and the little snippets that you have appropriately as the broadcast is happening. You don't just put historical facts out there generally, or statistical information, without it matching to something that is actually happening at the time. As you said, Michael, there are times when a broadcast doesn't go in the way that you had planned it. So that is when your overall ability as a broadcaster and your overall knowledge of sport will click in, because I think the best people who have done this job are people who are passionate about the sport, not people who just love the fact that becoming a radio or television personality makes them a celebrity. Because I know there are those who are drawn to the profession because they think it gives them a profile. But if you go with that concept and not think about whether this is something you're passionately involved in or not, it will impact on the quality of your work. So I would say that having real strong knowledge of what you're going to do on a broadcast is key. I remember one of the reasons why I so highly respect Tony Cozier, and this had happened at a time in the 80s or very early 90s, it may have been, when there was a match being played, a test match being played at Sabina Park, and there was something wrong with the pitch, and the game had to be called off after a couple of overs because the Englishmen were being battered and bruised by the
Yeah.
pace of Malcolm Marshall and company. And in one moment, as soon as the game was called off, Tony Cozier was able to say when this had previously happened in the history of cricket, and he traced, the history back to some match like in the 1930s about when this had previously happened. Now, I know that today, in today's broadcasting, the producers are there to furnish you with a lot of information, that the work for a broadcaster now sometimes is a lot easier than in our time, because the producers are now armed with a lot of computerized data that they can just pull up immediately to fashion how every moment of sport coverage is treated. But I can tell you that that wasn't what happened when Cozier did it. That was Cozier's brilliance of knowing the sport. And I brought that up to point out to you, Mike, that the question you asked about how do you prepare for even something that isn't planned, because obviously that wasn't planned. The match officials decided that the game couldn't continue. No one had bargained for that. But yet Cozier was able at the time to say when previously this had happened in international cricket. So a real strong, broad base of knowledge with regard to what you're going to present is the key to doing a good job as a broadcaster. But as you pointed out, Mike, you've got to prepare yourself for the possibility of things happening that you didn't bargain for.
Yes, that's important enough. And let's look at the Caribbean sports media, Lance, and how has sports broadcasting in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, in your view, how that has changed during your career? Because certainly with the onset of the social media and new technology and all of that, what would you say the transition, more or less, in terms of the sports media in the Caribbean?
Well, it's as you pointed out, we've seen a lot of changes, because last month made 42 years that I've been in the business. So I've seen 4 decades plus of media coverage for sports in the Caribbean, and the changes are significant. I remember when I started broadcasting at Radio Jamaica, the way we would get results from some of the matches, like schoolboy football matches, which were a pivotal part or a crucial part of our coverage for our news in the evening, because schoolboy football in Jamaica is really, really big. And I can tell you that when matches were played, we had like 40 matches being played on an afternoon, some in Kingston and St. Andrew, which is the city area, and then out of town. The way we got results for the out of town matches was to contact the police stations for the different villages, because each match a policeman had to be assigned to be there. So we'd give him probably half an hour to return to the police station and call the police station to get the result of the match, because there was no other way that we could get the result of the matches in time for them to make our 6:45 news in the evenings, because these matches would end like between 5:30 and 6, and by 6:45 we would have to be presenting the results. Now remember, the size of Jamaica tells you that some of the matches are 100 miles away from where we were in Kingston, and there's no way we could have paid correspondents for 40, 50 matches. So that was the method we used. Of course, now all you need is to have someone with a cell phone WhatsApp the result to you. So it is a completely different environment. You mentioned, the social media and so on. Information travels really, really quickly now. And traditional media is facing a challenge now, because I don't think the percentages of people like viewing any major 7 o'clock television news in the evening is the same now as it was 40 years ago, because a lot of people now depend on social media for their news. So that's a challenge for traditional media. Traditional media, though, has to recognize that it has to upkeep its high standards and protocols with regard to accuracy and reliability for information, because a lot of the social media platforms don't go through the rigid tests to, to clarify when stories are accurate or not. So it is a difficult time that we are in, but I think traditional media has a greater responsibility now, even though they are diminishing returns financially. I see, some of the major newspapers in the Caribbean have closed in the last 6 or 7 months. I was shocked to hear that Starbrook News in Ghana closed, Trinidad Newsday closed. So these are a sign, Mike and Rudian, of the times, because running a traditional media entity now, it costs a lot of money, and the financial returns in the sales and the commercial returns often don't match what the company, the income of the company. So it really, really is treacherous these times for traditional media. A lot of people who are in the media are transitioning to doing their own podcasts and so on. And I think as individuals, we may be a little bit stubborn if we don't recognize that we have to, pivot a bit and do some of that, because Sportsmax, my company, closed back in July last year, and right now I have a YouTube page putting my horse racing stuff on or so, and a lot of people are doing that now because depending on how committed and diligent you are with it, it is a source of income as well. But I would say, for me personally, maybe a lot of people wouldn't see it this way, but for me personally, it's troubling that the traditional media entities are going through the difficult times they're at the moment, because some of the problems stem from the fact that they haven't been properly funded. And now that the competition is on from social media and the other, media platforms that people have, it is highlighting that the traditional media houses have walked a tightrope for a very long time now, and in some instances they have not been able to cope. I'm not sure if there is a profitable television station throughout the Caribbean at the moment. I know some of them are state-owned, so the government will ensure that they are properly funded and so on. But for the private companies, it really is a struggle to keep them afloat at the moment, especially television. Radio may be a little bit less affected by the high costs of broadcasting than television is, because television is very, very expensive. So for me, it's very troubling, but we have to keep pushing on, because I'm passionate about media, and I think it's important for the media houses to tighten their grip on what's happening and try to stay afloat and flourish even.
But Lance, would you say too that sports journalism, or the sports media, especially in the Caribbean, became too focused on cricket and football at the expense of other sporting disciplines?
You could say that, but I would counter by suggesting that a lot of the other sports aren't popular enough among the average viewers to attract the kind of sponsorship that makes these things viable. Football and cricket are hugely popular, and we see clearly where the decline of the quality of the West Indies cricket team has shown itself in broadcasting. There is hardly a radio station in the Caribbean now, just a few of them, that carry live cricket. A lot of the major radio stations throughout the Caribbean had made a financial decision years ago not to broadcast cricket, because they just couldn't get the level of sponsorship to support it. And when they committed themselves to 6-7 hours of broadcasting a test match per day for 5 days, they would be eating into the sponsorship opportunities that they could otherwise gather. So, you mentioned football and cricket, but cricket is struggling at the moment as far as broadcasting is concerned. And I want to highlight what I'm saying by mentioning as well the FIFA World Cup that just ended. A lot of people were disappointed that they weren't able to see the World Cup on free-to-air television because throughout the Caribbean, a lot of the territories were unable to see it free-to-air. In Jamaica, it was on free-to-air, like live, like for 50% of the matches because Rush Television had the broadcast rights for it, and they shared the live presentations with Television Jamaica. So whenever Television Jamaica didn't have a live match, Rush would have the live match, and Television Jamaica would show the match delayed, maybe 4 or 5 hours later. That didn't happen throughout a lot of other Caribbean countries, and they had to rely on cable. And a lot of viewers throughout the Caribbean, Mike and Rudion, were very, very upset. And I want to point this out. That illustrated that in the Caribbean, when we were able for decades to be seeing these things live on free to air, people took it for granted because they thought that, they were owed this. They have a television at home. They should be seeing it without having to pay for cable to see it. But the high rights cost of these major events like the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup have put the broadcasters who have bought the rights under severe pressure. And a lot of the funds that would have gone into acquiring those rights were not retrievable. So they ended up losing a lot. And viewers are now probably beginning to realize that some of these events that they've been seeing on free-to-air television for so long, they have to consider themselves that they should be grateful to have had that, because there are a lot of places in the entire global market where viewers have to pay for these things. In the Caribbean, we've been able to see it on free to air for so long, but it's not automatic. That's just the point I'm making. It's such a lot of money involved, and a lot of it for the broadcasters isn't retrievable. So they have to find ways to ensure that when they buy these rights, they can secure at least a break-even situation for themselves.
Yeah, well, we've seen even for track and field, for example, in North America, it's Flow Track now. Once upon a time, it used to be just NBC that carried, but now Flow Track has even the Diamond League, for example, you know, and Peacock, you know, and so it has, the market has really changed, you know.
Yes.
Michael, if I could ask one quick question, Michael, concerning to what you just said. Give me 2 seconds. So, Lance, in everything you just said, it's facts and it's what we are seeing today. But you think in the Caribbean there is a demand for broadcasting as it used to be in the days? Yes, we didn't have the television, so we depend on broadcasting for the cricket. You're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, because that's all we had at the time. So based on the time we're living in, you think there is a demand for that, or people just want to see results? People just want to see a game without maybe listening to the broadcast and just watch it. In that sense, that's why you kind of seen a lot of this, the podcasting and stuff that you're seeing today. Is that you think is happening today?
I think there is still a huge demand for the broadcasting. Yeah, there is. And part of the problem that these cable operators have is that there are these streaming sites that people go to see the events and circumvent the cable. And that is part of the reason why cable television is struggling in the Caribbean and globally as well, because a lot of events that someone is being asked to pay extra for because they have cable television, people now have these fire sticks and so on that you call them, that you buy it once and you have access to everything. So that tells me that the demand for the broadcasting is still there, and people still want to see the events. They don't want to just get the results. I think there's still a huge demand, but because it is costly and people now have reasonably costless ways of getting them. I'm no expert with this streaming thing, so whenever these events aren't on cable and not on the cable channels that I pay for, I just don't see them. But I know I can make a couple of calls and people can tell me how to see them. So that tells me that the demand for the broadcasts are still there. And I think people love sports just as much now as they did 40 or 50 years ago, and they're just finding different ways to see them.
Lance, certainly, and we mentioned some of the people that you would have come across over your years, and one such, I think, is Esther Maynard in Barbados. Yeah, well, Esther was one who early o'clock will say, I will tune in, Mike, I will tune in. Just give me a reminder once it's Lance. So I know she's on. Esther Maynard, veteran administrator in Barbados. Ewart Lane is Lance Whittaker, my favorite sports journalist, and Curtis Cox. I think Curtis is from St. Lucia. Thanks for your service. Curtis is the marathon runner from St. Lucia, distance runner from St. Lucia. Curtis Cox says thank you. Lance,
You sure he's not linked to Trinidad and Tobago? Curtis Cox.
Curtis. I think Curtis is from St. Lucia, but runs in Trinidad or goes to Trinidad and runs the marathon or something. Well, I think it's something like that. But
well, he'll clarify in just a moment.
Yes, he will. Yes, Curtis. Lance, in terms of the responsibility, what responsibility does the regional media have to promote developing athletes and some of the lesser known sports,
that's a good question, Mike, because I usually stay away from the word promote, because I don't think our work, it ends up being promotion, but that from a passion standpoint for me is not the watchword. Because you're presenting it on a broadcasting platform, it ends up being promotion. But I think we have a duty to present a full scale of the sporting platforms throughout the Caribbean. And some sports sell themselves for sure, because football, cricket, track and field are massive sports. Horse racing is a big sport as well, but it is more niche. And I think we owe it as broadcasters to ensure that stories that require being told are told. And for my own delivery of how I present my sports is, I think that there are times when sports stars, regardless of what sport they're attached to, need to be highlighted. And I will go out of my way to highlight some of them, because I recognize that for one reason or another, they may not automatically get the kind of respect or attention that they deserve. Let's say squash. It is regarded as a minor sport. Squash is not a major sport in the Caribbean. But the outstanding Guyanese Nicolette Fernandez had been, during the 1990s, so successful that she had become the most highly rated squash player ever to come out of the Caribbean. She had a world rating at one time of number 16 or 17 in the world. And when she achieved that same year, the Women's World Squash Federation rated her the most improved player of the year. Now, because, as I said, squash is not a sport that is highly visible and is not publicized a lot, in my own presentation of my news, which at the time was based at the Caribbean Media Corporation in Barbados, I thought that there was no way I could comfortably and satisfyingly deliver my news stories for the month or the week without highlighting what Nicolette Fernandez had done, because she is, up to this point, the greatest squash player that the Caribbean has ever produced, because of the statistics I just gave you. And I constantly put her in our news, whether it was on the Caribbean Media Corporation television news or the print stories that we would disseminate through all of the newspapers, throughout the region, because to me, she earned it. And I didn't think she was getting the attention that she earned. Even when she was injured, she had a knee injury that kept her out of squash for about a year and a half. And every 5 or 6 weeks, I would do an update on her to say what her level of recovery is, because she kept having surgeries and so on. And when she thought she would return in 3 months, the specialists now say 3 months is too short. And it is how we should treat stories like those. And I know that cricket, football, and some of the major sports will sell themselves, but there are times you have to step out of the box and ensure that you give profile to an individual or a team that under normal circumstances doesn't get the highlight, but would have earned it. And that's pretty much what, you know, influences a lot of the stories that I target and the stories that I choose to put out there.
Yeah, Lance, getting back to so Curtis is from Trinidad and Tobago. Sorry, he says
Yeah,
he is
I thought
Trinidad,
so.
yeah, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
And adding that he won the Trinidad Marathon in 2005. He added that piece. Yeah.
I know he came up a little bit after the Paminos Valentine
era. Yes.
I think he may have raced
against him. Yes.
I think his career extended beyond the SVG star Paminos Valentine.
And I think he, if I'm not mistaken, he's still. I see videos of him still.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. He's still he has competed beyond the lifeline of Paminos, who at the time was the region's most celebrated marathon runner.
Right. Yeah. Haron Photo says the market has changed a lot. However, storytelling is a factor that lives on and still is in demand. We need to learn how to highlight our storytelling to the mediums where the people are from. And Nigel says, thank you, Lance, for sharing sedulous work over the years, wanting you to interview for Masters Athletics. Masters category. Mr. Whittaker, Curtis is saying, one of the most knowledgeable sports journalists in the Caribbean. Knowledgeable to the fact, Lance, that you mentioned briefly about the YouTube channel that you have now, which is the Lance at the Track, which deals specifically with horse racing. Lance, and it appears that people didn't know that. I mean, for you, yes, you mentioned that growing up, you listen a lot to horse racing, commentary, etc. But you have a passion for horse racing itself, you know?
Well, as I said at the top, it was the sport that most influenced me wanting to become a sports broadcaster. It's just that when I started in the profession as a sports broadcaster, horse racing, because of the place it held in Caribbean sport, wasn't that high profile, and I was presenting and gathering news on a daily basis for radio in Jamaica, and cricket and football for sure were bigger. And we had a racing commentator at Caymanas Park, Howard Abrams, who was like the most diligent broadcaster in history, because he never got ill. he never missed a race day. So, and he was the racing commentator, because when I just got into radio, I think I would have had as one of my goals to start doing horse racing commentary. But because there was a bigger need based on the platform I was working with at Radio Jamaica for, the football especially, and track and field, I never really got into live horse racing coverage, but it didn't dampen my desire to do horse racing stories, because I did horse racing stories every week and more than once per week during my radio time at Radio Jamaica. And I can tell you too that when I started at the Caribbean Media Corporation, I started to generate a lot of stories about how well Caribbean jockeys and trainers were doing in the USA and Canada. So I not only covered Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaican horse racing, which were, vibrant at the time. There was a little racing in St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Lucia started a racing platform, I think a little bit before COVID, but that didn't last very long. But I was always heavily into putting horse racing stories out there. I remember Patrick Husbands
Husband.
becoming the Sportsman of the Year in Barbados in 1998, I think it was, when he first won the Canadian title at Woodbine. And I had a chat with him after that, and he thanked me for that, because he thinks that the stories I had generated all throughout the year with him winning so many big races, so many stakes races, played a huge part in sensitizing Barbadian people to how well he was doing in Canada. And those are the things that are very fulfilling for me, because it means that the stories that I'm putting out there are having an impact. And that is, that's a very, very satisfying feeling to have. So horse racing, since I'm not at the moment in on staff at any media entity, I decided that I would start the YouTube page. Lance Whittaker Voice and Motion is the name of my YouTube platform, and to put the horse racing show on, because the At the Track program was a program I did weekly on Thursdays on Sportsmax. And when Sportsmax closed in July last year, for 3 or 4 months, there was no At the Track because there was no Sportsmax, and horse racing people kept asking me, Lance, you need to restart the show on your own, because it has a value, because the show on a weekly basis covers racing right throughout the Caribbean, whether it's Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, or wherever else. 10, 15 tracks in the USA, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks in Canada. And on an average, during the summer months, when pretty much all of the tracks are open, Caribbean people, and I have these statistics at the end of my show every week on a Thursday on At the Track, would win between 80 and 100 races, Canada and the USA combined, and a lot of them stakes races. And these are big, big stories for horse racing people. And I just felt there's a need to put this information out there, because no one else is gathering that kind of information to put into one broadcast. And I really do have a love for horse racing. I can tell you that. I don't like horse racing any less than I like cricket or football or boxing or track and field or anything like that.
Yeah, Lance, I really miss the wire, Lance, when the stories are coming through, and you see the horse racing results. And I know it's Lance work, because I see the LW, But
Yeah.
on a lighter side, Lance, I know about horse racing. There's one thing that a lot of people may not know of Lance Whittaker. Just
You are the kind, you're the flame of violet birds, wind and rain, shining light of this heart of mine, to the end of time.
yeah, Lance. I recall many years ago, Chenny Joseph and we were in Barbados. I'm trying to remember what we were there for, but you took us to this pub or whatever it was there, and that was the first time I heard Lance was doing his singing and thing, but I never knew, and that was our first experience, And I remember Chenny always asked Mike, when can we go to Barbados to link up with Lance? That's it. Yeah, that was. But Lance, talk about that. I mean, you find time, and I mean, even after all these years, I was surprised to go and I found some videos of you singing. I mean, up to recently, Lance.
Yeah, well, it's a hobby of mine. I love singing. I really, really do love singing. And I've been singing karaoke for a few decades now. It's therapeutic for me, and I enjoy singing. And I have done a couple of concerts that actually had an income attached to it, but I just like singing for fun, Mike and Rudy, and I don't see singing as a money making thing. It's relaxing for me, and I sing at karaoke's, like, on average once a week, sometimes twice per week here in Jamaica, as I did in Barbados. I was even more prolific on Barbados karaoke, sometimes 3 or 4 times for the week.
But I think I came across a story where you you were the not the headline act per se, but there was some concert, and you had some friend from Barbados who I think had a delayed flight or whatever it is like that, so was
Yeah,
coming to join.
that was a Jazz in the Garden concert that I had
Right.
done at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel back in 2011, I think.
Mhm.
And it was one of the few occasions that I sang for money that I was actually paid. But as I said, it's not something that I take seriously, but I enjoy singing. People ask me sometimes why I don't sing professionally. And when Sportsmax closed last July, someone told me, "Don't worry, Lance, you can make more money singing than you can make from broadcasting." But singing has been very important to me, and I can tell you a quick story because singing has given me two of the most important things in my life. And I will say, to begin with, one of the things that happened before I got the job at Radio Jamaica in 1984, there was a singing documentary that was presented on Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, JBC TV, and I was part of the group that sang. And this was engineered by a longtime Jamaican actress and broadcaster, Leonie Forbes Amiel, who died a couple of years ago. But she was a neighbor of mine. She lived in the same area that I did, and I knew her well. I knew her children well, and she knew that I could sing. So she put me in the group, and a part of the group was it was mostly folk songs, really, but there was a part that I did a duet as well. And by then I had my audition in to select for the job at RJR. Now JBC and RJR were rivals. And when the program director's secretary saw me singing on JBC, she went to the office the next morning and said to the program director and the sports editor, "Listen, that little fellow that you have here waiting to know if he's getting the job or not, I saw him singing on RJR, on JBC
JBC.
last night. So if you really want him, I think you should call him because maybe the JBC people might get him." And to this day, they tell me that's part of the reason why I got the job at RJR. So
Oh, it was
I,
fast
I,
tracked.
I'm inclined to thinking that singing has benefited me from that standpoint. And my current wife, the best decision I've ever made in my life to marry her. I met her at a karaoke. She heard me singing an Elton John song. Guess that's why they call it the blues. And she asked the waiter to buy me a drink, and I took the drink and went over and had a chat with her. And this was in 2012 January, and then we got married 7 years after that. So singing in an indirect way has given me two of the most precious things in my life at the moment. So I will continue singing.
Yeah, they fast tracked a lot of things there. Lance, Paul Thomas, Rowan Thomas says, "So Lance, I agree that the minor sporting disciplines in the Caribbean are in need of some highlight, but the younger generation of journalists are attracted to the main events because of their visibility. Thanks for your years of insight. The late Glenford Prescott," that would be of, I think, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Glenford Prescott, "was the first to pay attention to your work. I have been better at my work thanks to you." That's from Rowan Thomas. Well, I know him as Rowan Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because Glenford Prescott was one of my correspondents in St. Vincent and the Grenadines when I worked at the Caribbean News Agency in Barbados. And I spent a lot of time on the phone with Glenn Prescott about, delivering sports and so on. So I think it is important that people find mentors and people who can inspire them and guide them into the right direction to presenting sports. Because as I outlined to you earlier on, prior to getting a job in the media, Mike and Rudion, I was never formally trained. I didn't go to university to study broadcasting and journalism. I learned broadcasting, and I will say this without question, from listening to people who I knew were good. I listened to people like Hugh Crosskill, As I said, Tony Cozier and Chris Armand. I was a very regular listener of the BBC World Service, and I am a quick learner when it comes to practical learning. And when I heard them deliver broadcasting, it became very clear to me what the standards were in broadcasting well and what was required. So if Roy felt that Glenn Prescott was able to give him good pointers as to where his career is heading or should head, I would think that that is not a bad place to start. Choose good role models and be inspired by them, because from my perspective, and I know there are others like me as well, they fashioned the ability and the capabilities in this field not by studying or doing degrees, but having a talent and being aware of what world standards are. Because when I started broadcasting, I was so riveted to listening to BBC World Service and so on. I aspired to be a world level broadcaster, not just a good broadcaster in Jamaica. And that is part of my story, that I think I was given a talent and I worked hard at it and I had the passion to be good at it, and I've spent decades doing it, and I have to respect the results of hard work, diligence and dedication, because nothing in life comes easily. Well, there are a few things some people might think come easily, but for the most part, if you really work hard and you are dedicated to the level that requires immense success, you quite often will succeed.
I just want to steal a little more minutes with Lance, but Curtis says Lance is my mentor, and Gordon has a question for Lance. In this Pakistan tour of the West Indies, the current test team, our batting approach in the past ODI, and the difficulty in making 200 runs.
Wow, that's, to put it bluntly, as I said, I started broadcasting in 1984. In 1984, Clive Lloyd was the West Indies captain, and he transitioned to Viv Richards being the West Indies captain. And at the time, West Indies were unquestionably the best team in the world. There are sports researchers who will tell you that the West Indies cricket team of the late 70s into the 80s is the greatest sports team in the history of sport, not just the greatest cricket team in history. So to see the West Indies going from that position in the 80s and early 90s to where we are now, it is heartbreaking. It really, really is heartbreaking. And I've been a broadcaster doing sports throughout the decline. And I think the West Indies batting skills have declined significantly in the last 30 to 40 years. I used to talk a lot of cricket with the former Barbados Prime Minister Owen Arthur, and he shared the view that he thinks West Indies batsmen have lost the art of batting. When he started to see West Indies batters looking uncomfortable against short-pitched bowling, it grieved his heart, because in the days back in the 70s and 80s, you bowled short to Roy Fredericks and so on, and spectators would be picking the ball up in the stands. And to see so many West Indies batters now looking uncomfortable against short-pitched bowling, pace bowling, and high-quality bowling, not to mention spin bowling, because West Indies batters now look to be at sea when they are facing quality spin. I'm not even sure how to address that question, because I think it's a case of or batting quality has just gone down significantly. And people complain that the pitches in the Caribbean aren't good enough, and the sport on the sporting platform in the Caribbean is not as attractive as it had been previously. And I think those are some of the reasons. Money is a part of it as well, because the infrastructure and the facilities used to develop our cricketers isn't keeping a pace with what exists in India, Australia, England, South Africa, and other major places. So those are problems that need to be fixed, because if they aren't, we will continue to see the West Indies struggling at the at the bottom of the table, because what is happening now in West Indies cricket is very, very painful to watch. And especially, as I said, from someone who had seen when we were at the top, and not just at the top, but invincibly at the top. You know, Caribbean people were very proud of the West Indies in the 80s and 90s and prior to that. So, you know, difficulty making 200 runs in an ODI. I know people will say maybe sometimes the pitches are affecting the batting performances, but you know, when you have quality as a batsman, you adjust to the conditions and you find a way to make runs, you know. And you know, in the few discussions I've had with Reds Pereira, who is still actively involved in broadcasting media, well, not so much broadcasting as he was before, but certainly his interest level hasn't waned. He is also very aware, Reds is, about where our cricket is at the moment, and he quite often points to the administration that he thinks isn't doing as well as they need to.
And while we are at that, Lance, certainly a big loss to the Caribbean in terms of the legendary Sir Gary Sobers. Was Sir Gary one of those that you encountered while in Barbados?
Yeah, but by the time I got to Barbados, he had long retired, and he had been living in Australia for a while as well. So I didn't see him too often. But you know, this is one of the legendary figures in West Indies cricket that is generational. I knew he had a lot of appreciation for what Brian Lara achieved. I remember when he went to Antigua and Barbuda to watch Brian Lara break his own world record. And I think at the moment it is one of the problems that we're having in West Indies cricket, because the average youngster in the Caribbean now doesn't see a Sir Garfield Sobers or a Brian Lara or a Mikey Holding or a Malcolm Marshall as an iconic hero. There, you know, you will hear them more quickly talk about LeBron James or Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. So part of cricket's decline has to do with how young people view the sport. When I was growing up in Jamaica, I used to play cricket almost every day on the streets. When I went to Barbados in the mid-1990s, I still saw people playing tape ball cricket on the street. And, you know, and I would suggest that it's happening a lot less now. I don't see people playing cricket in Jamaica at all, unless you go to Sabina Park or, you know, Melbourne or one of the cricket grounds. I don't see people casually playing cricket on the streets or on the sidewalks as we saw when I was growing up. So cricket as a sport is not as attractive to today's youth as it had been to youngsters in the 60s and 70s. While I was living in Barbados, I was made very aware. I think I knew before, but people, you know, in the 70s and so on, cricketers would walk around with their collar turned up like this, trying to imitate Sir Garfield Sobers. Well, this shirt doesn't have a collar, but he would have his collar up like this, and it was just the sort of immense respect that people had for Sir Garfield Sobers, that youngsters wanted to be like him. You know, when I got older as a youngster, Lawrence Rowe, Michael Holding, you know, Alvin Kalitcharan, stars like those were on the lips of every young person when I was going to high school in Jamaica, because I played cricket a lot. I represented my school in cricket, and I always loved Alvin Kalitcharan, even though I was a right-handed batsman and Kali was a left-handed batsman. But you know, when we spoke about Viv Richards and so on, these were people who youngsters wanted to be like. And I you know, in today's world, I guess you could say Shea Hope is like one of our best batsmen or so, but I don't hear teenagers now wanting to be a Shea Hope. I hear them, as I said, talking about Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo and LeBron James and some of those NBA stars. So cricket has a very, very serious problem, which cannot be turned around with a snap of a finger. It is something generational, and to recover the ground that cricket has lost will take a lot. I mean, I could be negative and suggest that it will never ever get back to where it had been before, but I remember Curtly Ambrose getting into trouble for saying that some years ago, so I won't.
Rudian, I think that would have answered your your question on so many programs you have been
So many
asking
programs
about,
asking about,
yeah,
yeah.
about this, where folks are not more or less imitating our regional stars, but they gravitate more to those in North America and Europe. And I guess as much everyone will want to be a Messi or someone coming out of the World Cup, someone they see
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
World Cup, and
But
that's
even
another.
in this, this this profound comment you just made, and it's so true. Do you see a decline in sports in the Caribbean on a whole?
So some on a whole, well, for some sports there's been a decline for sure. I don't think we can argue that cricket has declined significantly.
Yeah.
But there are other sports growing. I think track and field is
Yeah.
growing. And in the past 2 or 3 decades, we have seen Kim Collins from St. Kitts and Nevis becoming
Yeah.
a world champion in the 100 meters, no less, because this is a marquee event that everyone wants to win. And to think of a small nation like St. Kitts and Nevis producing a world champion over 100 meters is significant. Julian Alfred is now an Olympic champion. Anderson Peters
Yeah.
from Grenada,
Yeah.
Kirana James. So there are things about track and field regionally that point to a growth in the sport. There's no question about it. But for other sports, I don't think there's much growth. I shudder to think that football, even though it's such a popular sport, and I think pound for pound is probably the most popular sport in the Caribbean, and I honestly struggle to suggest that football is on the improve. It may have marginally, but I don't think the growth of the sport of football is as significant as it should be, given the popularity of the sport. And I think that a lot more investment needs to happen. But sport on a whole, if you ask me as a whole, I would not say it has grown. I guess in some, maybe swimming, there are some swimmers from the Cayman Islands and other parts of the region who have produced world level performers in recent decades. But it's sad for me to say that I think sport is stagnating in the Caribbean. A lot of it is because, though, we don't have the kind of funding to invest in the sport as many of our rivals would. The Europeans, the Asians, and so on. There's so much more for them to invest in their sport, to develop their sport. Having said that, one of the criticisms we hear all the time is that Caribbean governments only focus on sport when it is successful and when there is a winning team that returns home and the sports minister meets them at the airport and there's this big celebration and so on. But the grassroots level development that is required isn't there, but it comes right back down to finances, because the health industry in the Caribbean, the education state of Caribbean schools struggling at the moment. And it's hard for me to sit here and suggest that they should put more money into sports when the infrastructure of our societies with education and health are so underfunded, because they need a lot of attention as well. I would say, having said that, though, that I think the possibilities or the potential of sporting success or sporting impact that a country could gain from investing more into sport would suggest to me that more attention needs to be put into sport, because it's not just playing the sport. It's developing a sport, developing broadcasters for sport, developing officials for sport. The Caribbean has had some of the most outstanding cricket umpires in history. Steve Buckner and others, have been outstanding umpires globally in the International Cricket Council. So developing people in the sporting industry is not always just limited to them playing a sport. There are other aspects of sport as a business that should be upheld as potential income earning professions for our people. And I don't think generally the Caribbean pays as much attention to sport as it should.
I think I think one person that will be happy with that comment is Carol Beckford from Jamaica. Sports as a business, Lance. Sports as a
Yes.
business, and well, Curtis says, Lance needs he needs to get back into sports commentary full time. I guess that's what
What is he? Is he saying he didn't like my singing?
Yes, he said. Well, at first he said he didn't know you were a singer, but now it appears that you are. And then he asked, "What was Lance's favorite Olympic moment?" Lance,
Wow.
you have covered 6 Olympic games. Certainly there should be one. Probably is it 2012, Lance?
Boy, you know what? I don't know how to answer that question. I really, really don't know.
I mean, I know we were in London in 2012, and it was a very important moment for the Caribbean in particular.
Yes.
Certainly, this one will be one where you will remember 2012.
Yes.
It was first, second, third, and even fourth. It was all for the Caribbean.
Yes, the Dominican Republic, Grenada, and TNT.
And then we had I think it was Chris Brown from Bahamas that
was fourth.
Fourth. 2012.
Yeah, that was a very, very pleasurable moment as well. But if you ask me to pick one moment, it's gonna be really hard. I could tell you 2 things. One, Usain Bolt's world record win in the 100 meters in Beijing was a moment for me that was unbelievable. And it may edge it for me as my best moment, because here was a man smashing by a big margin the 100-meter world record, and he had stopped running from 85 meters out. He had his arms outstretched, beating his chest, and in my commentary, I didn't really say what was on my mind, because what I was thinking was was things that I couldn't say on air, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It looked unbelievable that this man would be winning a 100-meter race so comfortably and breaking the world record at the same time. Having said that, I try to tell people that as a Caribbean broadcaster, because, well, people know that I'm a Jamaican, but I love the Caribbean, Michael. I feel that as a journalist, it is my duty to present the Caribbean as an integrated unit, not just win West Indies cricket, but our sporting success that we have had over the years. And I can tell you that when Kirani James won the 400 meters at the London 2012 Olympics, just a year after he had won the world championship as a teenager, there wasn't less of a joy inside of me than seeing any Jamaican win an Olympic gold, because I had seen Veronica Campbell, Bolt, Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price, a lot of Jamaicans win gold medals in the past over the Olympics since I'd covered from 1992 in Barcelona. That was my first Olympic Games. But the pleasure of a Keyshawn Walcott with his stunning upset win with the javelin in the 2012 London Olympics were just as big for me as moments doing commentary than any success that I saw the Jamaicans go through, because I just think that the Olympics is a platform for the Caribbean to shine. And while Jamaica and the Bahamas have led the way with Olympic champions and medalists overall, you know, when we see people from St. Lucia and Grenada and St. Kitts and Nevis winning Olympic gold medals and their population is less than 200,000, it tells you that there's something very special about the Caribbean athlete, and that triggers me, Mike and Rudion. Those are the things that give me the adrenaline rush and make me feel really, really proud to be a Caribbean person.
Yeah, certainly.
Yes, and Lance, as we get ready to wrap up here, I mean, the questions are coming in, but what should young journalists do when opportunities are limited and established media organizations are not hiring? You know, there are young talents out there who believe that they can make a contribution to the media, and opportunities are becoming more and more limited because of the change in landscape and things like that. So what advice would you give them?
Well, I would give them the advice that I went through, because it took me, I think, about 3 years of trying before I got into the media. I just didn't stop calling. I didn't stop sending in applications, and I just kept pushing and pushing, because I wanted the opportunity to be in the media as a sports broadcaster. Having said that, because of my love for music, I would have taken a job in the media as a disc jockey presenting, a continuity show, because I am just as knowledgeable about music as I am about sport. Well, I was at the time. I'm not sure about now, but it's the passion that will drive it, Mike. If you really, really want to be involved in the media, you've just got to keep pushing. And you just said that opportunities are limited, and so on. But I would suggest that opportunities were more limited in my time, because when I was trying to get into the media in Jamaica, we had 2 radio stations, RJR and JBC. We had 2 newspapers, the Daily News and the Gleaner. So there were 4 opportunities from an organization standpoint that I could target with my requests. In Jamaica now, I think we don't have 2 radio stations. We have about 34 or so. Well, newspapers would still be just 2, the Observer and the Gleaner. But opportunities in the media have opened up in recent years, as opposed to closing up. So, if there is a youngster who is desirous of getting involved in the media, I would say just keep pushing to the channels that you are targeting. But outside of that, there are no social media platforms that you can develop a proficiency in. And if you're good enough, you may find that traditional media will now want to bring you in. There are people now in the media who became media personalities because of what they've been able to do on social media. So I actually think that the opportunities are more now than they had been before. They may just show themselves in a different way.
Well, because I was about to ask you what concerns you most about the future of sports journalism in the Caribbean, and in addition to that, what gives you confidence that the next generation can take the Caribbean sports media forward?
Well, because I'm not exposed to the entire Caribbean media platform now as I was, maybe in the years when I worked with the Caribbean Media Corporation, it's a little bit more difficult for me now to assess what is out there now as far as talent is concerned. But I think if we are talking, Mike and Rudian, about a region that has produced Tony Cozier, Reds Pereira, Hugh Crosskill, Hubert Lawrence, my former commentator who died a few years ago, he did 4 Olympic Games with me. I think we have in the Caribbean a lot of talent, and I see no reason why that talent would have existed 50, 40, 30, 20 years ago and not exist now. From a Caribbean perspective, Ricardo Chambers and Donald Oliver, who unfortunately died a few months ago, are excellent broadcasters. And I think there is talent throughout the region. So I don't want to worry too much about the future of our broadcasting potential as far as sports is concerned. I would just rest on the knowledge that we have had world-class broadcasters before, and I see no reason why we should stop or can stop producing them.
Lance, and just like you who have had the opportunity to be trained at the BBC, I had the opportunity at the BBC Caribbean Service as well. Like a few others, I know, Mary Claire, for example, Mary Claire Williams, our good friend, Mary Claire Williams, and Aaron Garden, who basically worked at the Caribbean Service. Late Lou Smith, my uncle, also from the BBC Caribbean service. But do you think, is there a need for a regional training program for Caribbean sports journalists? I had the opportunity to attend CARIMAC, for example, back in the 90s, but do you think specifically for the sports media, a regional training program?
Yes, I think it would help, because there are a lot of people who have a lot to contribute to something like that. Because, as I said, I've been in it for 42 years now, and I'm kind of semi-retired at the moment, if you want to call it that. And I think I can offer a lot if I was to be a part of a program training young, or budding sports journalists throughout the region. But being guided by a fixed program that sets the guidelines and the standards for which sports broadcasting should be followed, I think is necessary, and I think it would be beneficial. I don't think anyone could argue that having something like that throughout the region would not help significantly, because there are a lot of talented people that just need to be nurtured and guided in the right direction. So I would suggest, yes, that would be a good plan.
Rudy, and before I come to you as we get ready to wrap up, Gordon is saying, what a great guest. Thanks for sharing your valuable time with us today. Very much appreciated. And Martin Felix is saying, lovely program, great interview. I so miss Sports Max. I appreciated the discussion panel format with the young lady from TNT, forgot her name. I particularly loved the coverage following Harbour Master event. That was excellent sports journalism. Lance, you can probably
thanks Martin. Yeah. He's talking about Mariah Ramharak, who was the last female host that we had. But before that, we had Alexis Nunes, who is now at ESPN, and Alex Jordan, who is still doing a lot of work with the global cricket broadcasters, covering Test cricket and ODI cricket and T20 cricket as well. So we've had some good ones passing through Sports Max.
But and I say, Lance, would you say too that Sports Max was even a launching pad for some of them? Because Alex Nunes, for example, is one who passed through Sports Max and landed at ESPN.
Of course it was. Sports Max was a training ground for a lot of outstanding media personalities in the Caribbean at the moment. And even the people behind the scenes. You are speaking specifically about the on-air presenters, but the camera people, the producers, and so on. When we had our final Sports Max Zone program in July of last year, which was tearful for most people, everyone, a common thread in the discussion and the narrative was how much Sports Max taught them. And this wasn't just from the presenters or the broadcasting standpoint, but right through the company in developing good videographers and editors and producers and so on. So Sports Max was, without question, a huge launching pad, because some really outstanding presenters have come through as well. Remember Simon Croskill, who has been one of the most outstanding broadcasters Jamaica has produced, and George Davis spent some time with us as well. He's a phenomenal brain, George Davis. So a lot of really good people have come through Sports Max, and we are very, very proud to have offered the Caribbean what we did at Sports Max.
Yeah, well, and thanks, Lance, because I recall in 2012, when that call came from Lance for the Olympic Games, because remember, I was already accredited, and then Lance said, Mike, we want you. I can't refuse Lance. So I had to deaccreditation, and get my new accreditation with Sports Max IMC.
Yes.
Remember that? Because I think you brought together, what was so good about that, you brought together a Caribbean pool of journalists from Trinidad, from Barbados, Jamaica. I was from Grenada, and that is what I recall, because I was able to do the trackside interview with Kirani James, when he won the 400. Yes. So
well, we were prophets, we were prophets at Sports Max. So we knew that Kirani would win the 400 meters. So we needed to have a Grenadian interview. So I set that all up.
Yeah. Yeah. Curtis says, I watched Sports Max since the days of Joel Villafana. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was the start of the Sports Max Zone.
Sports
Joel
Max, yeah.
Villafana,
Yeah.
myself, and Wavell Hines were the first.
Wavell, right?
Were the first presenters on the Sports Max Zone, which started in 2011, July 2011. The Sports Max Zone, yeah.
Well, look at that, and Wavell is now an MP. I remember Parliament.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So after, as we wrap, Lance, after decades in sports broadcasting, what do you understand about the profession that you wish someone had told you when you first started? Probably you didn't listen to your mother or something like that. So
At the risk of sounding a little negative, I would say that there are times when we put a lot of our sports stars on pedestals, but the opportunity as a sports broadcaster to meet and get to know them, more intimately, there are times you feel a little disappointed in what you see, because some of the personalities are a little tough. Are a little tough. So the outward appearance of them being stars and so on is what is glorified, but sometimes beyond that they are some of them are not as nice as we would like them to be.
Who they are.
Maybe not huge numbers, but I've come across a few situations where I felt a little disappointed because you have someone on a pedestal and you feel that way about a sports star, and then you get closer and you realize that all that glitters isn't gold, and they may be gold on performance.
Yeah.
But as we all know, it's not all of our stars that we would use as role models, because a role model carries with it something a little different or a little extra from a personality standpoint and an integrity standpoint. So I've had a few disappointments with that. So I guess that's how I could answer the question that you just asked.
Being politically correct. Lance, look at this.
Wow.
Yeah. You recall what year was that, Lance?
That would have been I'm not sure.
2013, Lance.
That's 2013 at the soccer
Cayman Islands.
Cayman Islands at a CFU Congress, the
CONCACAF
Sports
Summit. Because look, some familiar faces there. You are seeing some familiar faces.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I could only recall myself being on the extreme left. Lance is somewhere there. Yeah, that was 2013 Cayman Islands, the CONCACAF Sports Summit.
Yeah, that's Kevin Pyle there as well.
Kevin Pyle, right? Yes, Kevin is right.
There's Keith Griffith, the Barbadian football coach and commentator, and I think that's Kerry Gibbons on the extreme right there as well.
Yeah.
Trying to remember who the tall guy is in the middle.
I think he may be Guyana, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. That was a summit in the Cayman Islands. Yeah, I think
in the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, was Sepp Blatter was there? Was he at the time?
Yes, he was there. Sepp Blatter was there.
He was the president of FIFA at the time. Yeah.
At the time, yeah. Webb was the president of CONCACAF at the time.
Yes.
And I think that's where the MLS was talk about. The MLS will be one of the biggest leagues in about 10 years' time.
Yes.
And that's memories, Lance. Yes. So, Lance, always. Pleasure speaking to you. I think folks have, based on the comments coming in, we have enjoyed it, learned a lot, got to know that Lance also sings, as Curtis says, he never knew, but now you know, and you can follow Lance, the YouTube page again.
Lance Whittaker, Voice and Motion.
Voice in Motion.
Yeah, there's some singing on it as well, not just horse.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So they could follow that. Go onto the YouTube page. Voice in Motion, you'll get all about the singing as well as your horse racing program, right?
That's right.
Yeah, Voice and Motion is it, right? Lance, before you leave, when you reflect on your career, what do you hope your lasting contribution to Caribbean sports media will be?
As I said earlier on, I consider myself, Mike, a Caribbean person. And I know that as a Jamaican, people look at me as a Jamaican journalist. But I have spent so many times, months, years working on unifying the Caribbean thought process as far as sport is concerned. I would like my legacy to reflect that people saw me as someone that tried to bring the Caribbean together from a sporting angle, because I've always felt that when the Caribbean is doing well in global sport, all of us should be happy, regardless of which country the person is representing. And that I've used that as my mantra as a Caribbean journalist, which pretty much started in 1995, 11 years after I started broadcasting, because for the first 11 years of my broadcasting, I was just a Jamaican broadcaster. But having gone to Barbados and worked with the Caribbean News Agency and the Caribbean Media Corporation for 15 years, and then moving on to Sportsmax, which had a regional audience as well, I like to think about my career as regional, and I would hope that people who have listened to me over the years and read my print stories that appeared in the newspapers from the Bahamas in the north to Guyana in the south would recognize that there was this tremendous effort to make us as Caribbean people feel as one in sport.
So good.
Well said, Lance, and thank you very much. I know it was a long waiting, and I appreciate you being on the program, being our guest, and all the best.
Michael, just before you go, Lance, one question. Last question. We just finished watching the FIFA. What would it take, in your point, to see an English-speaking Caribbean team make it back to the World Cup?
Well, you say that because you're not regarding Curacao as an English-speaking Caribbean, right? So you're more talking about Jamaica and Trinidad and so on.
And I'm always speaking about,
Yeah. Well, I think there is quality in the talent available, but to succeed in football, a lot of precision needs to be executed, both from an administrative and a coaching standpoint. And Jamaicans will tell you that on both fronts, administratively and coaching wise, Jamaica let themselves down because they had a really grand opportunity to appear at the 2026 World Cup football finals. So efficient administration and high quality and strategic coaching and money investment as well are the factors to me that can get an English-speaking Caribbean team back at the World Cup. We hear Gianni Infantino talking about a 64 team World Cup next time and not 48, which means that the window is opening up, if it happens, for more teams to get in. And as you know, Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica had done it before, so there's no reason why they can't. But they have to invest properly, and the administrators of these football programs and the coaches have to know exactly what they're doing and make good decisions, because there is the potential to get back there as English-speaking Caribbean teams.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rudy, no problem.
And as Martin says, Haiti made it as well. So,
well, he said English-speaking Caribbean. So Haiti and Cuba had already played in the World Cup.
Played in the World Cup,
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Lance. I appreciate.
Yeah, man.
Thank
All
you
right,
for the
Rudian and
time.
Mike. Yeah, man.
Yes.
Great.
All
Okay.
right,
All the
thank you,
best.
thank you,
Been a
thank you.
pleasure. Yeah.
All right then. Yeah. Folks, so that's Lance Whittaker in
That's good.
Jamaica. Rudian, I guess you are happy now.
No, no, certainly, certainly.
Yeah.
It's listen, it's such a pleasure having him on. You know, he's such a phenomenal, broadcaster for many years,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know,
but
when you listen to him, you feel
yeah,
the sport when
yeah.
you really listen to him. It's almost like you're there, you know.
I
Yeah.
owe a
So
lot. I owe a lot to Lance for where I, you know, up to the time that I left the media, you
yeah,
know, I owe a lot to Lance for that, the guidance, everything. As I said, I could not have refused even 2012, and I appreciate that. You know,
yeah,
no, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's like Lance saw something that we didn't see at the time,
It's
but
not something I didn't see. Prophesy it.
yeah, it turned out that way, and I was very, very happy for that, no doubt. And yes, blaze the trail. Whether it's I was speaking to some of the folks when I put it out on Wednesday. I think it was Thursday we were talking about it.
Also, yeah,
And, a lot of folks, whether it's in St. Lucia, St. Vincent, they all had somewhere or the other benefited from his guidance and things like that. So, or Titus in Grenada, for example, even though he's not directly in the media, um, you know, you know, a lot of folks have been speaking and the contribution he has made to sports, the sports media in particular, and how much
social media.
that
Yeah,
the with the absence of sports marks, for example, I for one, had enjoyed watching, for example, schoolboys football.
football. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
whether it's from Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's from
yeah,
Jamaica, and I know they were making efforts to get into some of the other islands in terms of their school sports, but they were able to create, as you would say, a lot of stars, and
yeah.
things like that. So I thought it was a big miss, and hopefully, something will work out. But it's good to see that Lance is still continuing. I follow his the horse racing, and to be honest with you, Rudian, I became a fan of horse racing because of Lance.
Really?
Yeah, when at Radio Grenada, that became GBN, we had the wire, and the wire. When we say wire, was wire because it was
Yeah,
not like a telex machine. It was coming up, plop, 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 these sort of things, And that time it was Kana at the time, Caribbean News Agency,
yeah,
and that's where I used to see a lot of the horse racing stories, particularly about Caribbean jockeys in, as he says, in North America, but especially in Canada,
yeah,
husbands and all of those guys and things like that, and jockeys who have Caribbean heritage, and I started getting an interest in horse racing. Wasn't a big fan at that, and then when I moved to the US, I started looking at horse racing and all the other.
I mean, I watched one in time, but funny, Michael, Monday, I was in the area over by Woodbine, waiting for someone, and they were taking long, and I said, let me head over by the casino. And there was a race going on. I just decided to just walk over there, and then there's a race. I just went upstairs and I was watching. I was like, man, this is exciting. I need to come back some more because it's not. I mean, it's right there for me, and I didn't really go, And I said I need to come back some more and just find out the schedule and just come and sit down and just watch because it's exciting.
So,
Yeah.
so so when I look at Lance's videos to follow
Hmm.
what's happening. In fact, the 23rd would have been 2 days ago. I think there was one out just recent. On his program, and I get an idea of all that's happening in terms of regional horse racing. Yes, he's saying Woodbine racetrack in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's,
Restaurant.
that's what
Yeah.
I know about Woodbine,
Yeah. Yeah.
through Lance's stories and things like that. So, um, then Lincoln Torres saying there was a Jamaican guy who was in charge of sports at Ghana. He was very good too. I don't know if Toro is sure. I wonder if Lance is around and probably can. Let me see if Lance is still around, and probably Lance can share some light on that. Hey, Lance, yeah, I think if Lance can, yeah, Lance, yeah, you there, Lance?
That's Hugh Crosskill. I just typed it in. It's Hugh Crosskill. He will be talking about Hugh Crosskill.
Oh, Hugh Cross. Oh, Hugh is speaking about. Oh,
Yes.
okay, Hugh, and Hugh is related to yeah, Hugh. Right.
Hugh
But
is
Lance,
Simon Crosskill's older brother.
Older brother, Simon.
Yeah.
Hugh and Simon. Yeah. Thanks, Lance. Right.
But Lance, even what I see why you like racing. I mean, I was on the track and man, this thing is excited.
So you actually live in Canada.
I'm in Canada. Yeah. So I'm in Toronto. So I was there last Monday. I just went by and it's like, man, this thing is excited. Like it's just, it's fun. I need to go and watch some more.
It's a great sport.
I don't know about the betting. I don't know about the betting part about it. The people was betting and stuff. I don't know nothing about it. I just watch the race because it's a sporting event. I just love it.
Well, I don't bet. I don't gamble. I'm not a gambler. As much as I love the sport, I don't gamble. But horse racing is brilliant. Woodbine has lost a little bit of an edge because Patrick Husbands retired at the end of last season. He isn't riding this year, so he has now left the sport. He's 53 years old, so he's done enough. But he was the flag bearer for the Caribbean as far as riders are concerned. But before him, you had a Jamaican jockey, George Hosang, and a Trinidadian jockey, Emil Ramsamy, who were also champion jockeys at Woodbine, who were brilliant as well. It's just that Patrick's career was more sustained, and he did well for a longer period. But he wasn't the first, I can tell you that. There was George Hosang from Jamaica and Emil Ramsamy from Trinidad and Tobago.
Right.
But that was good. Like I said, when you go to the now is the King's Plate, but when you have the Queen's Plate, like you can't get in. I know I tried one time a few years ago to see the Queen's Plate, and I could not get in. You just ram pack. You just
Yeah. But Lance, while you're on that, many years ago we used to be listening to the radio to, I think the horse racing used to be coming from England or something like that, and the folks used to go into this. They used to go into like a parlor, right? Yeah. That's in Grenada in particular. To bet. But they listen to horse racing via the radio at times, and they have these things that they bet in, and it used to be on a Saturday in particular, right?
Yes.
But that was many years ago. But I never thought it was horse racing in the Caribbean. I always thought about horse racing in England in particular.
Yeah. When I was growing up, the betting shops had live racing from England as well. It was in the betting shops. The betting shops would have the racing, but it wasn't video though. It was just a radio.
Right, it was just radio commentary.
Yeah, but people would be in there betting a lot of money. But
But Lance, now do people win a lot of money in horse racing?
If they win a lot,
yeah, I'm asking.
Well, they'll tell you when they win, but when they lose, they don't tell you.
It's so true.
I don't think gambling is profitable, so I don't gamble. I don't like gambling. I just love racing as a sport. Yeah. But I've got to run, guys.
No, it's fun. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, because I want to know Rudy, and
I like it's like I said, it was fun. It was nice.
Yeah. They follow a lot on there. Oh, yeah. I'm laughing over that. Yeah, Rafi knows from Trinidad. Rafi knows from Trinidad. Yeah, tourists talking about Rafi knows from Trinidad. That's a name that I talk a lot about. Yeah, Rudy, and so Commonwealth Games, CAC Games, all of that taking place. I know.
Michael, there's this. Do you think the Commonwealth Games is coming to an end? The era of the Commonwealth is coming to an end?
I saw an article that I still need to go and read about in terms of the.
I think maybe the same article we probably read about the same too. Yeah.
Because remember, the Commonwealth Games, this year's Commonwealth Games, apart from, because remember it should have been hosted in, I think, in Victoria, somewhere in Australia, for example.
Yeah.
So at the last moment, but and then we have a revised Commonwealth Games
Schedule, yeah.
and then we still had as Keith Joseph spoke about, the clash between the Commonwealth Games and
the
CSC, and some
CSC
of the
games,
participants have to make a decision whether they'll compete at the Commonwealth.
Way to go, yeah.
And there are some who are competing at both, because remember,
some are going to fly to one to the next,
Anderson Peters from Grenada, he will be competing, I think, in both, right? Kirani, for example, he has never competed at the CAC, so he chose to compete at the CAC. He competed at the Commonwealth Games before. And some of them have to make that choice, and it's sort of unfortunate that you have two major championships that clashing around the same time. But the question is valid, and I think I need to go and read about it, whether or not the Commonwealth Games are probably, I think they're speaking about the demise of the Commonwealth Games. Curtis say you lose more than you win. Favorites don't pay much in horse racing. He says it's a gamble. It's a gamble. But as Lance says, he prefers to report on the horse racing, not to mention it. The horse racing. Rudian, as indicated, getting ready for summer recess, because it's the time of the carnival season. Yes. Caribbean, so we take our recess as we do for the Easter and as we do for the Christmas. Next week, God's willing, will be our most likely
last one
program for the summer.
Are you traveling?
Yes. Family time around. And as we said, there's cricket on. Apart from the Commonwealth Games with all that's taking place, there's cricket.
US track and field is on too.
And the track and field is on as well.
In your neighborhood?
I know it was affected by rain earlier, but that we are back on. West Indies versus Pakistan. West Indies 102-4-2, right? After the first of two test matches, 35.2 overs. Bass and Rudy, I hear you all was wearing Spanish t-shirts for the World Cup final, or they changed team fast?
Never. I take my loss. I get all my phone calls. People ask me if I'm still crying. I take my beating.
Well,
I don't. It's
as indicated.
It's what it is. Yeah.
I had no horses in that race. At that time. So anyone, with all the controversies and things like that. So. Rudy and LeBron gone to Philly. That means Toronto dead.
I don't like the move. I prefer there's two teams you could have gone to, which is one of my team, which is the Golden State Warriors, or you should have just go to Miami. It just, the East just become very strong now. Yes, we see New York winning the championship, yes, but however, I think that move just really boosted the East, and it's fun. You're going to find a lot of teams doing some shaking up as well to strengthen their team based on that move alone. Even though LeBron is up there in age, LeBron being on a team changed a lot, changed players. So certainly, I think you find the strength in Philly now. Let's see what they can do, but. We have never seen LeBron switch a team and win a championship in the same year. So let's see what happens. It never happened. So if it happened, that's another history, right? All the other switches happen. It takes a year or 2 years or 3 years before they actually win a championship. So let's see what happens. But you have to do what you have to do in the world of sport. And then he signed a 2-year contract, which I'm sitting there saying, is he thinking of LA? Is he thinking of is that the thinking to play at the Olympic Games? And I'm thinking that you might see that might be the thinking because he's hosting the US. That might be the whole thinking too, right?
Yeah.
So who knows?
Cox, what is Rudy's sports background? Track and field. Cox is track and field. Give a big up to St. John Sports in the regional football competition. There's the CFU Shield competition.
Show competition, yeah.
Trinidad and St. John Sports into the Big 16. The Big 16.
Yeah, Big 16, yeah.
So they're doing well. World Masters Outdoors Championships in Daegu, South Korea, August 22 to September 3. And Bass, when you go to church tomorrow, say a prayer for West Indies that they won't get another beat. Yeah. So, folks,
so Michael, even going back next on my World Cup, and I'm sticking to my word, like I say to people, and forgive me for saying it, but whenever Donald Trump show up, my team always lose. So that's my word, and that's what I'm sticking with, and that's what happened. So the World Cup loss is because of the president, nothing else. That's what I'm sticking with, and I'm holding that.
Julian, thank you very much. All the best. Always a pleasure having you.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank
and everyone else. Yeah.
Lance Whittaker for being with us, and next weekend I will tell you, because I know the couple of requests to fit in our program, and we'll try to see what we can do for our final program before we
could extend it and probably make it a longer one. So let's see.
Recess for
next week, you might,
so that we'll be able, seen as we getting ready to go on our recess. Best results: Belgium beating USA, Spain beating Argentina. Best results. But the interesting thing that we have to follow though is the pressure that the FIFA president is actually under in terms of whether or not that will really play out into anything, because it seems as if the Europeans, they want his head. There are others who are calling for his head. And he has been asking for an additional, term or whatever it is that they call. And
I think so too, Michael. I think there's a lot of things that happened. We see the red card situation. If the US did win that game, I think it would have been a lot more, controversy happening in that game. But then did that situation boost Belgium? Boost them. Definitely, I think it gave them, more power, more strength, in that game. But I think that's certainly, and we see a lot of calls, we see a lot of things that happen. Listen, it's not the first time we see star players get red card. We see it happen to the English player Beckham. Happened with Beckham. We get red card before. Maradona get red. A lot of players get red card before. Now you're seeing, red card people, and somebody make a phone call and things change. And that's what they say. They say they made a phone call. If they said nothing, nothing would have come out for it. Right? He come out and he bragging about it, and he say he made a phone call to his friend, and his friend turned it around. I don't know. Well, listen, it's just what it is. That just
never know, because the latest that was circulating this week is that the president of the United States is recommending that Infantino, the president of FIFA, he's recommended for him to be the new Secretary General of the United Nations, because the current term is coming to an end.
It's coming to an end. But did that put a stain on the US hosting the next World Cup? Did this whole thing put a stain on that? And that is maybe something, future will tell us.
Even the issue of the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General, this is something that the Security Council, has to make that recommendation in the first instance. It has to be voted on by the general membership. So it's a lot of,
it's a lot, there's a lot in there, but certainly.
So that's something you'll have to look at. Infantino staying, he will throw some money to the CONCACAF and African countries and they vote to keep him as president. Europe vote is not enough to remove him to remove Infantino.
And maybe that might be what it is. And maybe that's what's needed. Maybe that's what he needs.
well, remember
Yeah.
when and the CONCACAF, for example, because remember when
Yeah.
Jack One was around,
Well,
CONCACAF
it's around. Yeah.
had a big say because they had what 30-something votes, right?
Yeah.
30-something votes, and inside of that CONCACAF, you have the CFU where they can caucus, right, and ensure that they can speak in one voice when they go to CONCACAF, right, because
Yeah.
there are more Caribbean affiliates in CONCACAF, right, and you have a big block of voting, so that's why
Voting. Yeah.
that's why it's important. But I'm not so sure that the politics of FIFA, but Toro is
getting at.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. All right, no problem. Yeah.
Thanks, Rudian. Thanks also to Lance who joined us earlier. Folks, always a pleasure having you. As I indicated, we'll see what we will be able to do on our final program before the summer recess, right? And we'll see as much as we can get in, talk about, because by then we'll have the closure of the CAC, the Commonwealth Games. I think there's the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committees. They have their anniversary coming up. We have the Goodwill Games coming up as well, so we want to speak to some of the participants getting ready to participate in the Goodwill Games in late August, somewhere in August there. We'll be on recess during that time, so we want to see how we can get them into the program. Thank you very much, one and all. All the best. Remember, support sports, right? Wherever you are, however you can support, whether you can go to the stadium, you can go to the cricket ground, and as Lance was saying, he made an important point before I leave, but we don't see folks playing cricket as we used to. When I was growing up, it was the same thing. You played cricket in the road, in the street, and when a vehicle is coming, you move your wicket, and then you continue again. We don't see these things again. So yes, I think he made a very important point. There isn't that passion for the sport as it was when we were growing up in terms of cricket. We have seen for a while basketball, for example, and all because of the influx of basketball on television. We've seen what used to be cricket in the street became basketball, for example. And even now we are not seeing that many folks out on the courts or on the street playing basketball, as they used to before. Just something to think about. Folks, that's all for this weekend. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to your company next week. Let's say, do have a safe and wonderful weekend.